A lot of modern spending doesn't feel like spending. It feels like motion. A tap, a swipe, a subscription renewal that happens while nobody is looking. The numbers are usually small enough to pass as background noise. $2 here, $1 there, a few cents per transaction, a monthly fee that's basically nothing. They show up as line items, not events. Most of these charges aren't hidden in the sense of being secret. They're disclosed. They're printed. They're technically visible. But they're not experienced as a cost, in the same way rent is a cost, or a car payment is a cost. They live in the space between attention and habit, where financial systems do their quietest work. Small fees are the kind of expense that can be everywhere without ever feeling like a single decision. And that's the point. Not a conspiracy, not a shock, just a set of incentives that makes small enough to ignore a very profitable size. The daily landscape is full of tiny tolls. A bank account that charges a maintenance fee unless a balance stays above a threshold. An out-of-network ATM that charges twice, once by the machine and once by the bank. A food delivery order with a service fee, a delivery fee, a small order fee, and then an extra regulatory response line that doesn't quite explain itself. A concert ticket that starts at one price and ends at another after processing. A brokerage trade that claims to be free, while the real cost is embedded somewhere else. Then there are subscriptions that behave like furniture. Streaming platforms, cloud storage, premium versions of apps, memberships meant to reduce other fees, bundles that exist mainly because unbundling is unpleasant. The monthly total is rarely calculated because the charges arrive on different days, in different categories, under different merchant names. A few dollars at a time feels less like an expense and more like a condition of access. It feels acceptable because the fee is framed as the cost of convenience, safety, or speed. The charge isn't presented as extra. It's presented as what makes the service possible. Even when it's not strictly true, it fits the story people are used to hearing. Systems cost money to run, so small fees are reasonable, and it's rarely calculated for the simplest reason: calculating it is annoying. The fees are scattered, not centralized. They arrive as fragments. They're easy to recognize individually and hard to understand collectively, which is exactly how everyday expenses become background. Small fees become everyday expenses through a design that looks accidental and behaves like engineering. The system works by breaking one meaningful price into many small prices, then distributing those prices across time, context, and psychology. Start with the basic logic. A company wants revenue that is stable, scalable, and resistant to competition. Raising the main price is visible and invites comparison. Adding a fee is often less visible, harder to compare, and easier to justify. A base price competes in the open. A fee competes in the margins where attention is limited. This is why so many products now resemble a low entry price with add-ons. The base is the headline. The fees are the infrastructure. In many industries, the real margin lives in the line items that people don't use to decide whether to buy. Payment networks and intermediaries reinforce this structure. A card transaction has costs: interchange, processing, fraud risk, chargebacks. Some merchants fold these into prices. Others pass them on as explicit surcharges. Either way, the fee exists. When it's passed on directly, it becomes a visible microtax on ordinary activity. When it's embedded, it becomes a quiet inflation of everything. Banks and financial platforms have their own version. In an environment where interest margins and competition compress profits, fee income becomes a dependable pillar. Overdraft fees, wire fees, paper statement fees, expedited transfer fees, foreign transaction fees, each is defensible in isolation. Together, they form a business model that monetizes friction and exceptions. Subscriptions add another layer. A one-time purchase is finite, a subscription is ongoing. The math is straightforward. The easiest revenue to plan around is the revenue that repeats, especially when the service becomes habit-forming or simply habitual. A subscription doesn't need to win attention every month. It only needs to avoid losing it. This is also where premium tiers thrive. A product is built with a baseline experience that is functional but slightly uncomfortable, then a paid layer that removes the discomfort. The fee is framed as a preference, but often it's payment to restore a feeling of smoothness that used to be standard. Why does it persist? Because it is aligned with incentives across the chain. The seller gets more margin without moving the headline number. The intermediary gets a cut. The platform gets recurring revenue. The financial system, built around transaction volume and predictable cash flow, prefers many small extractions to a few large ones. And the consumer experience, even when it's not loved, is tolerable. Tolerable is enough. The invisibility is psychological, but it's also architectural. People don't perceive money as one continuous stream. They perceive it as categories, moments, and feelings. Small fees exploit all three. The first mechanism is thresholding. Below a certain dollar amount, the brain treats a charge as negligible, even when the same charge repeated becomes meaningful. 10 separate $2 fees don't feel like a $20 purchase because they don't arrive as a single event. They arrive as 10 interruptions, each too small to trigger alarm. The second mechanism is compartmentalization. A parking app fee doesn't feel connected to a bank fee, which doesn't feel connected to a subscription, which doesn't feel connected to a delivery surcharge. Each lives in its own mental folder. The folders don't naturally add themselves up. Then there's timing. Many fees are delayed, billed later, or processed after the main transaction. The emotional moment of purchase has already passed. A receipt is reviewed quickly, if at all. When the fee appears on a statement days later, it arrives without context and blends into other charges. Language matters too. Service fee, processing, convenience, platform fee, regulatory recovery. These terms are deliberately bland. They don't describe what is being purchased, only that something has been handled. The vagueness reduces the chance of a clear argument forming in the mind. A person can dislike a fee, but it's harder to dislike the fee for the thing that had to be done. Design choices finish the job. Defaults are sticky. Auto-renew is standard. Free trials convert unless interrupted. Fees are displayed in smaller text later in the flow, after time has been invested. And once time has been invested, backing out feels like wasting effort. This isn't mind control, it's simple probability management. Every additional step needed to stop a charge lowers the number of people who stop it. What makes it truly invisible is that the system doesn't need anyone to be fooled. It only needs people to be busy. On a large scale, small fees behave like a private tax system, not collected by the state, but collected by infrastructure. They fund platforms, processors, aggregators, and gatekeepers. They also reshape markets by making certain behaviors more expensive in ways that don't look like price increases. The scaling is powerful. If a company adds a $1 fee and it applies to 1 million transactions, that's $1 million. If it's $1.50 and it applies to 10 million, it's 15 million. Because the fee is small, the dropout rate may be low. Because it's recurring or frequent, the revenue is stable. Stable revenue supports higher valuations, more expansion, more lobbying, more integration into daily life. Normalization follows. Once fees are everywhere, they stop feeling like a choice by any particular company and start feeling like weather. A ticket has fees the way it has a barcode. A bank account has fees the way it has a routing number. Delivery has fees the way it has a bag. The system becomes self-justifying because it becomes familiar. Structurally, the benefits concentrate in the entities that sit between people and what they want to do. Intermediaries do provide real services, security, coordination, logistics, access, but the fee system often grows beyond cost recovery into a profit engine precisely because the intermediary's position is hard to bypass. The impact isn't evenly distributed. People with less flexibility, less time, less cushion, fewer alternatives, tend to pay more in the fees tied to exceptions and urgency. Overdrafts are more common when buffers are thin. Expedited payments are more attractive when timing is tight. Pay in 4 and cash advance products generate fees when liquidity is fragile. Even when the per fee number is small, it lands harder when the budget is tight. Meanwhile, people with more leverage can avoid many of these charges through higher balances, premium products that waive fees, better credit terms, or simply the time to comparison shop. The result is a system where small fees can quietly widen gaps, not through a single dramatic policy, but through ordinary repetition. Small fees don't announce themselves as a system, they present as details. A series of minor charges attached to specific moments, each one explainable, each one easy to dismiss. The system reveals itself only when those moments are seen as a pattern, access conditioned on extra payments, convenience priced separately, friction monetized, attention treated as a scarce resource to be routed around. In earlier eras, the main price carried more of the weight. Now the main price often functions like an invitation, and the fees function like the admission. Not always, not everywhere, but often enough to shape expectations. People don't just buy goods and services. They rent smoothness. They pay to avoid waiting, to avoid uncertainty, to avoid paperwork, to avoid the sense that something might go wrong. The interesting part is that this doesn't require anyone to be unusually greedy or unusually careless. It works because it fits modern life. Fragmented schedules, automated payments, long chains of intermediaries, and interfaces designed to keep everything moving. Small fees become everyday expenses the same way dust gathers in a house that's lived in. Not because anyone held a meeting about dust, but because motion creates it and nobody notices it one particle at a time. The end result is a world where the cost of living isn't only the obvious bills, it's also the quiet tolls for participation. Not hidden exactly, just dispersed, normalized, and engineered to feel too small to matter, until in aggregate they do.